Welcome back to Archery, not Anarchy. I have noticed over the last few episodes that the audio seems to be really, really cramped together and moving very fast. Maybe it's the player that I'm using, but when I edit it on this side, it sounds completely normal, like conversational speed. So I'm going to not use my usual editing tools this time, and hopefully it sounds normal and not like I'm off my head on some sort of drug and riddled with anxiety. So, wherever you're listening, if you're driving, if you're walking, if you're out shooting, you shouldn't have earbuds in when you're shooting. Come on now. Whatever it is, just settle into it and listen to my rambling. Because, surprise, surprise, I have had a lot of thoughts building up over the last while. And a lot of it would stem from the EIAC there in March. We've already covered the bulk of my observations of the EIACs, but there's more. Spending 5 days immersed in archery, not just shooting, but watching, observing, reflecting, it does give you a lot to think about. And I want to share some of the more subtle, reflective things that happened, things I didn't really put into words at the time, because thoughts were coming together just before that and then progressed through it. And since then, so I've been thinking a lot. I need to stop thinking, I think. Total contradiction there, as always. So, the EIAC, my first competition, and I've talked about it previously, so you know my feelings about it in terms of my performance and whatnot. I'm not cut up over my performance. I really am not. I turned up, I fucked up, and I laughed. And I pulled faces, some of which people have sent me photos of, and it's just been like, okay, probably need to work on that a bit. But overall, it was just genuinely a very positive experience. As you know, I was down there from the Monday through to the Friday, and I feel that's important because it wasn't just a one day thing. It wasn't a show up, shoot, go home. It was something you lived in for a few days. Most people arrived early in the week, settled in, and you would see the same people each day based on the fact that everybody was put into groups. So there was also people that you didn't see at all. And you got into a little bit of a rhythm, and that changes how you experience things, I think. From the start, everything felt very well organized. I cannot fault IFAF at all in their organization, their preparation, their presentation, everything. To me, it felt really, really well organized. You knew where you were to be, you knew what was happening. There really wasn't that sense of confusion or scrambling around. And for a first competition, that matters a huge amount. And some of you might remember your first competition, or some of you haven't had a competition yet, but internally before a competition, you're already dealing with a lot. You're thinking about your shooting, you're aware it's your first time in that kind of environment. There's more people, more structure, more attention. So when the external side of it is steady, it just lets you settle into it a bit more. That was definitely the case here. I genuinely couldn't fault it. And I don't say that lightly. If I did have any issues, I would certainly be voicing them. And the whole thing, it really just worked. One thing I didn't expect, and this is probably one of the biggest things I took away from it, was how much time you spend not shooting. You go into it, I went into it anyway, thinking it was going to be constant, arrow after arrow, focus the whole time. But because it's spread across multiple days and the way it's scheduled, it's not like that at all. There's a lot of waiting, there's a lot of standing back, a lot of just being there. You arrive, you go to your bow check, and then it's up to you what you want to do. You know, do you go back to the hotel and get settled in, which is what I did, or do you stay and you kind of take it absolutely everything in, and then you arrive on the morning that you are shooting, or the afternoon or the evening that you're shooting, you get set up, you shoot your ends, you step back, or in my case, you sit back, because thankfully I had people pulling my arrows for me. Again, sincere thanks for the help with that. And in my case, I was watching, I was occasionally chatting to some people, occasionally not chatting to some people, and then the session ends and you leave and you come back the next day and it repeats. And in all of that, there is a lot of space, and that space gives you time to notice things. I found myself doing a lot of that, just noticing, not analysing people in detail, not judging anything, just really just observing how people step up to the line, how they prepare, how long they take, what do they do after a shot. And I found the differences really interesting. Some people had very clear routines from before they started shooting. You know, they would sit and they would have music on, or they'd have something playing in their earbuds, earpods, whatever the things are called. Earbuds? I don't know. I'm not hip and down with the kids. They'd be listening to something, their eyes closed, they're just zoned out, focusing, getting themselves grounded, preparing. And then there was other people who would turn up and just get the stuff together and essentially be straight onto the line. Some people have very, very clear routines. You could almost set a clock by them, same movements, same timing, every single shot. And you could tell that they built that over time. It was automatic. Others were a bit more fluid, less rigid, still focused, but just different. And neither to me was wrong, neither felt wrong. They just had different ways of approaching the same thing. And there was everything outside of the actual shooting. I remember on a few occasions being back behind the line watching shooters along the line. And there was one gentleman, I think he was either Swiss. I think I've talked about him before. He was either Swiss or I actually can't remember where he was from. But he had a very, very deliberate setup. You know, checking his stance, adjusting his bow, the way he breathed, the time he took between every shot, everything, every arrow was methodical and it was hypnotic to watch him, genuinely. And then slightly down the line from him, there would be somebody else who had a looser approach, quicker resets, more fluid movements. But they were still hitting the target consistently. And I thought, yeah, there really isn't a single correct, so to speak, way to do this. And they weren't kind of just technical observations. I was also noticing, I think, how each person's mindset came through in their shooting between ends, between sessions, across the days. You would see how people interacted. I noticed the subtle social dynamics between clubs. Some groups had a really clear sense of camaraderie. They laughed together between ends, checked scores with each other, helped each other set things up, or just to kind of chat with each other. You could see how the social element added to the atmosphere, how it made the shooting experience feel easier and more enjoyable. There was very much a sense of ease there. And over the few days, that became more noticeable because you're seeing the same people again and again. You start to recognize patterns, who arrive together, who leaves together, who gravitates towards each other. And it adds something to the overall experience in a way that's hard to describe, but you can feel it, you know, the camaraderie, the support from club mates and whatnot. It's not about anything big or obvious. It's just a sense of being part of something and experiencing something with people who you are in a club with. And then there were others where the connections weren't as obvious. The group cohesion wasn't quite there. I don't want this to sound critical, it's just an observation, but it made me think about how you feel in a space isn't always about the coaching or the technical guidance or whatnot. It's also about how the people around you interact and support each other, how your club interacts and supports each other. And being in an environment where people are naturally collaborative and encouraging really does make a difference to your own mindset and your enjoyment of shooting. And again, it's not a comparison, it's just something I noticed, because when you're in that kind of environment for multiple days, you do start to see the full picture, not just the shooting, but everything around it. And I think that's what stuck with me the most. It made me think about how many different ways there are to experience archery. That again is something that I have thought about since the very start. It's something that I have explored in different episodes as well. It's not a brand new lightning strike thought or idea for me, but it's sort of reignited that within me. And it's something that I was thinking about, not just technically, but mentally and socially and personally. Some people are very clearly focused on results, and you can see it in how they carry themselves, how they reset after each shot, how much each arrow matters, how people seem to relate to the outcome of their shooting. And for others, the overall experience seemed to carry just as much weight as the result. It feels slightly different. Still focused, still engaged, but the experience seems to sit alongside the result, not underneath it. And I thought that kind of changed the feel of things. But it did make me think about where I sit within that. Because if you're in an environment where the emphasis leans strongly one way, it naturally shapes how things feel. Usually not in an obvious or intentional way, it just becomes the tone. And if your own approach is slightly different, you do start to notice that, even if at the time you can't quite put your finger on it. But when you're in a shared space, those approaches influence the overall tone. Even if no one's trying to make that happen, I think it just develops. And if you were in a group with some people, which in the end, in the group that I was in, there was 3 highly focused people, very highly focused. And at that stage, I wasn't messing or anything like that. I wasn't being unserious, but my shots had gone just, my God, wherever. And all I was doing was just trying to keep getting up and shooting. That's all I was trying to do. I was trying to focus on that, and that was enough for me. Whereas one specific person I was shooting with, it was all about those X's. And if he didn't get right on the X and he got slightly off the X, he was not happy. And he was also shooting those broom handle like arrows as well. And I was actually really enjoying watching that sort of mentality at work. So because I was in a group with people who were that focused, I found that it really did affect the vibe in the group. There was no chatting. There was no relaxing for a minute for those 3 people. I mean, as I said with me, I was kind of like, okay, that's the way it is. We're just going to keep going. And I just sat and relaxed. But these people, and fair play to them, I swear to God, none of this is a criticism. They were so focused that it really, really was chalk and cheese between the first group that I shot with and the final group that I shot with. Not to say that the first group weren't focused either, but it was just a completely different type of mentality. I don't know how to explain it. I do care about results. I really do. But more than that, I care about the satisfaction. Like, I like to see progress, but I also like feeling connected to the sport itself. I like relaxing and enjoying it. I, as I said, was probably a bit too relaxed. I probably could have been harder on myself, but I think if I had gone down that route, I wouldn't have enjoyed the experience at all. I genuinely don't think I would have enjoyed it. I would have been putting massive amount of pressure on myself. I would have been sitting inside my brain, giving out to myself, putting myself down and whatnot. When I completely did the opposite, yeah, I said, oh, Jesus, this is so embarrassing. I'm mortified. But then I still got up and picked up the bow and shot. And it's okay if your pace or your goals differ from those around you on paper, but we all know different. Archery is simple. You stand in line, you draw, you aim, you release. But in reality, everything else matters as well. The pace, the rhythm, the people, the atmosphere, all of it feeds into how you actually shoot. Until I was in the competition, I had experienced that a small amount, but it was very much magnified at the EIAC. At the beginning of your archery journey, you usually just show up, you follow what's there, you try to improve, and that's exactly what you should do. You need that phase, but over time you start to notice differences, and that's a really important phase. I don't think you can skip that. Having a place to go, having people around you, having some level of guidance, it gives you a foundation and it gets you started and helps you build those early habits. But I think at some point, naturally, your focus starts to shift a little gradually. You start noticing what parts of it you enjoy more, what kind of session you feel better about, what kind of session feels better to you, what kind of rhythm suits you when you're actually shooting. Some sessions feel better than others. Some feel more natural, some feel a bit off, even if you can't explain why, and some others are an absolute shocker. I've been paying more attention to that in any group You're going to have people with completely different goals. Some are very competition focused. They're training with that in mind. They're refining things. They're working towards specific outcomes. Other people are there for a different reason. They might just enjoy the process of shooting. They might be there to improve at their own pace or just to switch off for a while and do something they enjoy. And when you have all of those approaches in the same space, the overall feel of that space tends to settle into a certain type of rhythm over time, even if you don't really notice at the time. And when you change your environment even slightly, different aspects of your shooting start to come forward. You might feel more relaxed or more aware or more experimental. And I'm more open to the idea that there isn't just one way to structure your practice. Personally, when I have practiced in the past, I've liked replacing the face with some cards to see if I can focus in on those. I like to shoot at bottles, drink bottles. I'm not talking about the 1 liters or whatever. I'm talking about the 500 mils or whatever they are. I like to kind of shoot at those. I like to kind of mix it up and try and get my focus right. Long term, I'm not sure how well that has helped me given how I performed at the EIACs, but it has definitely made it more enjoyable for me. And given that's the type of thing I do, I feel it is probably best for me not to be training in the hall at this stage because the competition training doesn't work for me. And I don't want to be imposing my preferred training methods on other people. So recently I started to change things. Nothing dramatic or anything, just doing more of my shooting on my own at home, taking my time, not following a strict structure. And there's some of you who are probably saying, woman, you need a strict structure. You need to be in that environment. You need that because clearly your shooting is shite based on the competition. But I disagree. I disagree. And look, do you know what? Let's just do a little experiment on this and see how this goes. If my shooting is already shit, then this isn't going to be the worst thing in the world. And it's been interesting because when you remove everything else, you do notice different things. There's no set pace, there's no shared rhythm, there's no expectations. You just shoot. You know, I'm not standing there waiting for somebody to call the line. I'm not standing there listening to somebody saying that X amount of arrows in this amount of time, or we're going to do this training today, or we're going to shoot bunnies today, or we're going to do this today, or we're going to do that today. Maybe I am too selfish to be in a club. I don't know. But I think if this sort of approach works and keeps me doing the sport, I don't see a problem with it. And with this approach, maybe I will shoot fewer arrows, but with more focus. Maybe I'll take longer between shots. Maybe I'll take less time between shots. Maybe I will actually think about what I'm doing. That's one thing from the EIAC that I did start doing was very much slowing down my shot cycle. It was something that I found difficult in the hall when I was doing it. But once, and this goes back to what I was saying before, the environment, once I was surrounded by other people who slowed right down, they didn't rush to shoot their first arrow. And they took practically the full 3 minutes down to the last couple of seconds to shoot all of their arrows. And watching that really helped me slow everything down. One of the biggest shifts in my change of approach is just allowing it to be what it is, not forcing it into anything, not forcing it into a structure every time. And it has brought me back to the simplest part of it. Draw, aim, breathe, release. Just paying attention to that. It also removes a certain layer of noise, and I don't mean actual noise, but that background sense of pace and expectation that exists in any shared environment. It's been useful for me. There are no outside influences that are throwing me. I'm not rushing because I feel that I have to do X before Y happens. I'm not carrying a feeling with me of I have to do this to make X or Y happy. And it is just a lot more natural for me, a lot nicer an experience for me. It is a cleaner, for want of a better description, experience for me. So that's what I've been doing for the past few weeks, especially the past week. I have been exploring things, trying different things, not locking anything in. And being out and shooting in the garden or whatnot, sometimes you just stop earlier than planned because that's enough for that day. And there's no guilt around, I'm leaving early, I'm not helping set things up, I'm not helping clean things up, that kind of thing. Because in the past with the club that has happened, I haven't been there to set things up. I haven't been there to take things down, or if I have been there to take things down, I've carried the least heavy thing possible because I'm not going to lift extremely heavy things, although I have actually tried with some of the backstops to lift extremely heavy things at the detriment to hurting myself again. And shooting at home has removed that guilt to a certain extent from my side. At some point, I might try a different club just to see different environments. It's just about experiencing the world of archery that kind of opened up to me at the EIACs. I will definitely be doing more competitions. I haven't been scared off that at all, but I'm not going to be rushing any of it. I'm just letting it develop. I'm going to be buying a different riser and putting different limbs on. Because I love Bane so much, it's pretty much identical to Bane. It's just ILF fittings on it, which I don't think were available when I bought Bane, which is why I have different fittings. But here we are. And I think that's part of it. There's no rule that says that your approach has to stay the same. It can change, it can evolve, and I think that is a good thing. And that's something I'd already been thinking about over the last while anyway, just in terms of my own shooting. What I enjoy about it, how I like to practice, what feels like it suits me best. In watching other people as well, the small details, the way they align their stance, the subtle shift of their shoulders, the timing of the release, it gave me new ideas to experiment with. And I found myself mimicking some techniques, not exactly copying them, but adjusting them based on what felt right for me. And it is a reminder that archery, as with a lot of things in life, is a constant learning process. Even when you're not actively shooting, you can learn a lot just by watching, noticing, and reflecting. Again, not just in archery, but in life. So the EIACs gave me a lot more than a medal. They didn't even give me a medal, but they gave me a lot more than I expected. They gave me things to reflect on. They gave me time to focus. They gave me lessons to learn. And they also gave me the really, really cool memory of God knows how many arrows, hundreds of arrows, being shot at once and the sound of them hitting their targets. It's the coolest sound. It just genuinely, the first time I heard it, it was just so cool. It really was. And it gave me such happiness. So, what it also gave me was the final lessons of observation. So, pay attention to the details. You know, you learn a lot without even shooting. Sometimes I get too caught up in the shooting part, just shooting off the arrow, just get that done. I need to respect my own rhythm and my own goals. My approach doesn't have to match anyone else's. And I shouldn't be letting the influence of somebody else or other people's goals influence the way that I shoot and my goals. There are small moments between ends, like in the downtime where watching others can teach you as much as a formal practice. The amount of times that I watched people and went, oh, okay, I might try that. And you know what? Maybe I should have waited until afterwards to try these things, because quite often I would try them the next time I stood up. Another thing is really, really just to enjoy the process. If it's training, if it's competition, whatever it is, do whatever you need to do within reason. Obviously, don't ruin it for other people. Don't be obstructive. Don't be rude, whatever. But enjoy the process of archery. You know, the medals, the results, they're really nice, but they're not everything. And archery is personal. What works for me might not work for somebody else. And that's part of the beauty of it, I suppose. At the moment, that means for me practicing at home, future competitions at my own pace, just steady, thoughtful progress. And that is where I will leave it for now. With editing, this is not going to be as long as I thought it was going to be, but that's always the way it is. Thanks for spending this time with me, reflecting, observing, and thinking about archery in a slightly different way. I hope it encourages you to take pause in your own practice, notice the small moments, and find your own rhythm in shooting. And as always, I would like to advise you to stay in by the wall and mind the arrows.